What if I told you that doing almost nothing every day, just 1% more, would make you 37 times better in a year? Stay with me for the portion of this video, and I'll show you exactly how small steps become seismic change.
He was ordinary in a way you recognize in yourself before you recognize it in anyone else. The same coffee mug every morning, bills shuffled into the same drawer, ideas that lived on napkins and then died there. His name was Amir, not because it meant anything special in the beginning, but because that was the name his mother called when she wanted him to hurry. Amir's life was a steady line of someday promises. Someday I'll write that book. Someday I'll get in better shape. Someday I'll start the business I keep sketching. Like most of us, Amir had read the headlines, the overnight success stories, the lightning strikes, the TED Talk trajectories. He wanted a story that read like a movie, a single turning moment where struggle dissolved and destiny arrived. The trouble was, he had no appetite for the drama of heroic change. He was exhausted by trying to conjure it and failing. He needed something sustainable, something he could actually do on a Thursday. The first real spark came from a small, almost silly place, a cracked step outside his apartment. The edge had chipped off in the rain, a hairline fracture that, if ignored, would slowly grow. Amir found himself staring at it and realized the step had been cracked for months. He had been stepping over it without noticing, and each small step had widened the crack almost invisibly. That cracked step became a metaphor. If neglect could compound into damage, then perhaps attention could compound into repair.
That same week, a stranger told him something very simple. Do 1% better than yesterday. It sounded like a mockery at first, too small to be useful. But there was a number behind the mockery that turned the sentence into a promise. Improve 1% every day for a year, and mathematically, you become 1.01 to the power of 365 times better, a number around 37.8. Decline 1% every day, and you fall to about 2.5% of where you started. Those were the two phases of compounding: exponential growth and slow erosion. The mathematics felt like a quiet miracle. Amir decided to test it. He did not tell anyone. He bought a small blank notebook and labeled the first page 1%. The first entry was easy and intentionally small. Read one page. The next morning he read one page. The following evening he wrote, run 1 minute. He ran for a minute. He wrote, save 50 cents. He did it. The rule he made himself follow was almost insulting in its simplicity. It had to be so small that failure felt absurd. The aim was not heroism, but habit. The days passed. At first, change felt invisible. Nothing dramatic happened. Friends did not notice. The notebook looked like an inventory of trivialities, but little accumulations began. 1 page became 2, then 5. 1 minute became 3, then 10. The 50 cents became a small fund that grew under his mattress, and then, once it had weight, moved to a savings account. The magic wasn't in each act, but in the tendency those acts created, a bias toward showing up. The first test came sooner than he expected. A company-wide innovation challenge was announced at Amir's job. For years, he had had half ideas he never finished. This time, he used his daily increments. He treated the pitch like a mosaic built of tiny tiles. 1 paragraph a day, 1 sketch a day, 1 short conversation a day. On the day of the presentation, his deck was not a masterpiece. It was steady and honest. He didn't win the talk prize, but the head of a division asked to meet him and offered mentorship. The seed had been planted not by one dramatic leap, but by hundreds of near invisible steps. Along the way, Amir encountered the two enemies of tiny habit work: impatience and perfection. The first makes you quit when you don't see fireworks. The second makes you never start for fear of not doing it perfectly. He learned to neutralize both by lowering the threshold and removing the drama. He adopted rules that became rituals. The 2-minute start: if a task looks big, do it for 2 minutes.
Habit stacking, attach a new tiny habit to an existing one, and the non-zero day. Do something, anything, that moves you forward, even minimally. There were days that would have crushed a lesser practice. His mother fell ill, his partner left, a file of setbacks arrived like uninvited mail. For a while, the notebook grew quiet, but the practice had given him something he had not expected. Not a shield against hardship, but an anchor in it. When the world tightened, Amir returned to the smallest possible acts. 2 minutes of deep breathing, 1 paragraph, a 30-second plank. The practices did not cancel the pain, but they refused to let pain be the whole story. They were a quiet refusal to let the world dictate surrender. One afternoon in the second year, a ruin of a plan pushed him close to giving up. A project with a friend collapsed with accusations and bitterness. It felt huge. Amir could have retaliated, dissolved into bitterness, or simply stopped trying. Instead, he performed 3 tiny acts. He wrote a short account of what had happened, he sent 1 message seeking clarity, and he walked for 10 minutes to clear his head. Those tiny acts shifted his trajectory. The writing clarified what was salvageable and what was not. The message opened the door for a calm talk. The walk reset his mood. Change remained small, but it was undeniable.
As his life realigned, so did his identity. There is an almost invisible but critical effect when you do something tiny every day. You begin to see yourself as the kind of person who does that thing. 1 paragraph a day makes you a writer. In the same way, a single call a week makes you a connected friend. Identity is less a declaration and more a pattern we rehearse. Amir began to list the identities he wanted: reader, runner, saver, creator, and then committed to the smallest possible behavior consistent with each identity. The behaviors accrued into a character. People asked him if he was lucky. No, he said, I was consistent. That honesty was part of his appeal. The contrast between spectacle and steadiness made him oddly magnetic. Friends began asking for tips. He found himself describing the math of 1% and the rituals that supported it. He gave them a short kit. The minimum viable habit. Define the tiniest version of a habit that you cannot refuse. Habit stacking. Link the habit to a current cue. The 2-second pause. Before any major reaction, do 2 slow breaths to interrupt default responses. Measure inputs. Track what you can control. Time spent, pages read, minutes practiced. Non-zero principle. Always do something, even the smallest thing, to keep momentum. These were not rules to be worshipped, they were scaffolds for experimentation. One of the most powerful moments came when Amir realized how small gains multiply when they're combined. Reading expanded his vocabulary and curiosity, which improved his writing. Writing made him clearer at work, which made his ideas more persuasive, which led to mentorship and resources for his side project. Exercise improved his energy, which improved mood, which improved relationships. These intersections are the hidden algebra of compounding. Small advantages rarely operate in isolation. There were also instructive failures. At one point, Amir became obsessed with optimizing everything. He started tracking sleep in 3-minute increments, calorie splitting, breath counts. Optimization became its own tyranny. He forgot the guiding question: what 1% will matter most? He had to step back and drop the obsession for simplicity. The lesson was clear. Small improvements should increase capacity, not create a perpetual checklist that drains joy.
To help keep him honest, Amir invented an evening ritual called the tally and release. Each night, he did two things: tally the small wins of the day and then release the anxieties of the day by writing them on one page and tearing it out. The tally trained his brain to notice success. The release prevented accumulation of petty resentments. The ritual transformed small wins into a feeling of forward motion and prevented small losses from accumulating into despair.
As the years continued, Amir's change was not linear. Progress came in fits, with plateaus, regressions, and surges, but the overall slope pointed up. He learned to think in seasons instead of moments: the summer of steady runs, the winter of focused reading, the spring of concentrated writing. Patience became the overlooked muscle he trained. To make the idea more vivid, imagine two neighbors, same starting point. One chooses tiny daily improvements, 5 minutes of study, a 10-minute walk, saving a small amount each week. The other waits for inspiration, trying to bulk plan massive life changes every Sunday. After a year, the first neighbor has developed stamina, a knowledge base, and a small emergency fund. The second neighbor has had occasional sprints and many false starts. The difference isn't dramatic in month 2 or even month 6, but by month 12, the small leads compound into momentum that's hard to overtake. That's the advantage of daily tiny action. Within Amir's neighborhood, small public stories began to appear. A baker who tried adding one new pastry a month saw customers double because variety attracted more visits. A teacher who read one new education article a week changed her lesson plans and regained joy in her work. A father who started saving one coffee's worth each day built a fund that paid for his daughter's summer camp. These micro-experiments produced local ripples.
One day, a neighbor called Amir, telling him about a dream opportunity that required courage, a chance to publish a short collection of essays. The problem? His writing was still working class in pace. He had drafts, but no discipline. He could have been paralyzed by the scale of the task. Instead, he returned to his rules: 1 paragraph a day, 1 edit a week. Months later, the collection had shape. It would not have happened without the steady sandpaper of small acts. There's a metaphor that captures the practice: the compound river. A single drop of water is meaningless. Thousands of drops are a stream. The stream carves rock, not because each drop is powerful, but because the accumulation repeats on a steady schedule. The river is patient. It does not ask to be celebrated each inch of the way. It simply persists. Your daily 1% is the river. Amir's story also taught him about leverage. Not every small action carries equal weight. A dozen tiny wins that multiply in sequence matter far more than a dozen isolated ones. To find leverage, ask which tiny habit will make other habits easier. For Amir, morning 10-minute writing sessions helped him become a reader and a thinker, which then improved his work. For someone else, a daily 60-second meditation could eliminate the emotional friction that sabotages decision-making. The trick is to pick a few high-leverage micro-habits rather than frequent scattershot attempts.
Let's be honest, people want a secret shortcut. There isn't one. The secret is ordinary and therefore unspectacular. It's choosing a path that the world underestimates. It is making choices that are too small to attract clapping, but large enough to steer the ship over time. When barriers come, and they will, the smallest possible wins are your antidote. If you're exhausted, the minimum viable habit might be 1 minute of reading. If you're stressed, 1 breath. If you're bankrupt of time, 1 minute of planning. When those minimums become non-negotiable, you build immunity to the chaos around you. You create a personal baseline. There's also a moral element to the small step approach. It requires humility. To practice 1% daily is to accept that great outcomes are built on unglamorous days. It is a refusal of performative heroisms and an embrace of steady craft. That humility brings freedom. You stop trying to be the person you aren't yet and start becoming the person you want to be through repetition. A turning point in Amir's life came when he finally tracked a full year of small habits. He looked at the notebook and the bank account and the files and realized that what he had built was not just competence, but optionality. With small savings, he could say no to a job that drained him. With steady writing practice, he could pitch with confidence. The small steps had created optionality, the most underrated form of freedom. One crisp evening, near the end of the second year, Amir stood in front of a small group at a community center. He told his story simply: the cracked step, the tiny notebook, and the 1% rule. He explained the math, how 1.01 to the 36th power becomes 37.8. And then he showed them his notebook with no dramatic flourish. People were moved not by spectacle, but by the clarity of the arc. Ordinary action, extraordinary result.